Great. Well, once again, thanks y'all for joining us this evening. Um, we have a great presentation all about our Oregon dive program and the work that's happening there, uh, presented by our very own Diana Hollingshead, who's our Oregon Regional Manager and has been with the program since it was launched in 2021. Um, some of y'all might know her if you're Oregon volunteers or maybe even Washington volunteers. But I will pass things over to Diana to talk more about the Oregon program and the restoration work that's happening there.
Thank you, Jackie. Let's go ahead and get started then. Okay, are we good for sharing?
Looks great.
Good. Okay, great. Well, welcome to Reef Check and Oregon Kelp Alliance Partnership for Restoration. Maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't know that Oregon now has a restoration program, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, along the west coast of North America, Reef Check helps ensure the long-term sustainability and health of our nearshore rocky reefs and kelp forests. Reef Check volunteer citizen science are divers that come in a wide range of backgrounds who take a proactive role in making sure that our nearshore ecosystems are healthy and well managed. We train scuba divers and to be citizen science familiar with local marine life and how to survey kelp forests. We provide them with the skills to conduct scientific surveys, then lead them to monitor kelp forests along the west coast. And some of you may actually be in this picture. So a little bit about our mission, vision, and niche. So Reef Check is a non-government organization led by scientific divers and citizen science divers in training. We have standardized protocols that we're monitoring indicator species. And so in Oregon, as you can see, we have the 27 species of fish, 29 invertebrates, and 11 kelp species, along with uniform point contact transects that we do. Um, these species that we are monitoring are commonly observed. They could be exploited by humans, either by fisheries or collections. They could be ecologically important, or they could be invasive species. Or it could be like the sunflower sea star here that has pretty much disappeared off the Oregon coast. However, last year we started seeing some baby sunflower sea stars, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is pretty exciting. So we all know what happened back kind of in 2014 through 2016. So we had this warm water mass offshore of the West Coast. Named the blob. And then we had 2 years of El Nino. And so we had a lot of warm water influx during that time period in combination with sea star wasting disease. So I have some data here from Northern California because Reef Check was not in Oregon at the time. But Northern California pretty much mirrored what happened in Oregon. So as you can see here, kelp forest loss drastically declined in 2014. The spike in 2021, we did not see in Oregon, but pretty much kelp forests were lost and they have not really recovered since then. So what does this mean? We have the beautiful kelp forest offshore. Yes, I know this is another California picture, but this is giant kelp. We have bull kelp in Oregon. We have one location that we do have giant kelp, which is kind of fun, but we have bull kelp forest in Oregon, and so we went from the lush forest to the urchin barrens, just like what happened along most of the rest of the West Coast. So again, this is when we had the heat wave, and then the critically endangered sea stars, the sunflower stars, were decimated. All of the grazers reproduced, ate all the kelp, and we're in the situation where we are now. And you can see here, again, this is some numbers from Northern California. But it really mirrors what happened on the Oregon coast. Urchin populations increased rapidly. Kelp was completely decimated. And this is a picture of what a typical urchin barren looks like. I know you guys have problems with green urchins in Washington. If you're from the Washington area, purple is what is really affecting the Oregon coast. As you can see here, it's just urchins on top of urchins on top of urchins. Sometimes we're counting over 1,000 urchins per transect. It is sometimes ridiculous. So then, after the back-to-back marine heat waves, obvious kelp loss, community members and local scientists were interested in the question of what is the status of kelp in Oregon? Where did it go? What can we do about it? And how is it faring? So, taking a look, then trying to find kelp maps in Oregon. The map on the left is Southern Oregon. The map on the right is Central Oregon. These maps were drawn in 1912. That was the last publicly available documented kelp maps, 1912. So there was a lot of kelp on southern Oregon coast. Central Oregon, not as much. Central Oregon, there are bits of rocky reef, but then northern Oregon, there is more kelp forest that way, up that way too. So ODFW has been studying what is going on since 2013. 2013 is when marine reserves and marine protection areas were introduced in Oregon, and so surveys have been taken. So this is where the ODFW has been doing surveys at. However, this data is not publicly available. They cherish this data and will not share it with scientists, with the public, with anyone. So basically, in Oregon, we have been in just this data black hole of what's going on in Oregon. Again, what is the status of kelp? We don't have a monitoring program. What are we going to do about that? There's anecdotal evidence from fishermen who have previously observed kelp forest, from experienced scuba divers that dive offshore Oregon. And there are not a lot of scuba divers that dive offshore Oregon. It is challenging at some times. And then there's public interest of charter boats going out. The fish are declining. The numbers of fish are declining. So what's going on there? We need data for permits of how much kelp is there? What are the other species? How much do we have? What is the biomass out there? Baseline data is needed before field science can happen. And then is needed to start any restoration effort. So we need the baseline data. So what happened then? Oregon Kelp Alliance is a group of diverse people, like-minded, that we're starting to question of, okay, where is the kelp gone? What can we do about it? So in 2020, actually before that, Oregon Kelp Alliance contacted Reef Check. And here's some of the people on the technical panel, contacted Reef Check and asked, okay, we need to get some data so that we can do something. And so then in 2018, because there was a little bit of a start here before that. So 2018 was kind of where the partnership started. 2018 at Macklin Cove down in Brookings. So Brookings is 6 miles north of the California border. This was the first Reef Check Oregon long-term monitoring site. 2018, this was a comparison site for Pyramid Point, which is a marine protected area in California. So bumping into Oregon just to get some surveys done to have a comparison area. But hey, we will take the data. It is Reef Check data. It is monitoring all of the protocols that are the same up and down the West Coast for Reef Check. So we started out with several sites. We wanted to look at uh, these sites here. Macklin Cove, obviously, Nellie's Cove in the south, because there's a boat that will take divers out readily down there. Cape Arago has historically been a urchin fishery. Chief Kiawanderrock is west of Salem, and the Lookout is west of Portland, and that has a lot of public interest due to proximity to large population bases. So at that point in time, between Reef Check and partnership with Orca, um, Reef Check came to Oregon in 2021. So as you can see here, there was only two surveys done in Oregon in 2018 and 2019. 2020, Nellie's Cove and Port Orford was surveys. And then 2021, we doubled the amount of surveys by Reef Check coming to Oregon. In 2023, you can see the spike there. There's a reason for that, is because Orca was getting ready to wanted to publish basically a baseline status report of what is going on in Oregon. So there was a huge push in 2023 to get as many sites surveyed as we could. So we actually surveyed 17 sites that year. And then 24, 25, and 26, we're focusing more on, okay, we know what's there. Now what can we do about it? So and like I said, the Orca status report was published in 2024. Using Reef Check data, along with some other data that was gathered by Oregon State University and Oregon Institute of Marine Biology and the Oregon Coast Aquarium. So all, excuse me, all doing the same type of surveys up and down the Oregon coast, just finding out what the status of the kelp in Oregon is. And this is a QR code for the link for that status report there if you're interested, or you can find it on OregonKelp.org. Okay, so now we know what we have. What are we going to do about it? So we have the urchin barren back to the kelp forest. Is there anything that we as a species can help the ocean get back to that kelp forest that we need? So working on restoration through partnership, Reef Check can organize urchin removal efforts, sorry. Reef Check volunteers and commercial divers and free range divers. We're still monitoring the ecosystems. Subtidal and drone surveys are being done by Reef Check and by Orca. Orca has a drone that they're doing some pretty cool drone surveys, and there will be a picture later that's really cool. And then kelp enhancement. Can we help Orca with some of the for spore bags, planting spore bags, archive units, winding baby bull kelps into ropes to plant into the ocean to grow more bull kelps? And yes, it does work. We saw results last fall. And then another partner, the Gravem and the Galloway Lab, are working on sunflower star experiments throughout the summertime and then releasing them in the fall. And there is a permit pending currently for possible sunflower star breeding program. And that would be with those labs in conjunction with the Oregon Coast Aquarium and breeding some sunflower stars at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Again, permit pending. So for reef check restoration efforts, last year, 2025, ODFW allowed an LOA to be issued to anyone who applied for it. So there are some strict things that need to happen. And the QR code here is it takes you to the actual LOA page. You have to let them know where you're going, how many urchins you're removing, basically a controlled culling event, what if they're red or if they're purple. And you have to report back to them before you leave the parking lot of whatever location you are at. And there's specific locations required too. So Nellie's Cove out of Port Orford is the main place that this is happening at. Macklin Cove out of Brookings again. We're working on them. And then Chief Kiawanderrock, which is the one out of Pacific City. However, if you want to help do restoration efforts with Reef Check, we make it easy for you. We do all of the reporting for you. You just take a class and come on out on the boat with us. That's all you have to do. So speaking of classes, what is available now? So we still have monitoring available. We still have the standardized protocols that are all up and down the West Coast, plus our restoration protocol, which is standardized now too. So you can become a Reef Check Kelp Force monitor and training, or you can become a restoration diver in training. So again, the restoration protocols are standardized. We practice ethical culling. Um, they're Reef Check scientific divers in training, and you will be under safe diving practices the entire time, under guidance, essentially. So for Oregon, we have the three sites already. Again, permits pending ODFW. And this is all pending on our initial spring monitoring surveys so that we can find out what the biomass of the urchins are in this specific locations. Okay. Macklin Cove we have already. We know that. That's good for 2026. Nellie's Cove is good for 2026. And Chief Kiawanda Rock is good for 2026. Um, okay, sorry. Macklin Cove, again, was one of our first survey sites. Those are the years that we did the surveys at, and we saw results last year. Take a look at those pictures. It's pretty exciting. So on the left, they're both in September 2023, before any culling happened. And then on the right, after culling happened. So there was three spore bags that were tossed in there along with the culling, and we grew like a mini kelp forest. I was so excited because I'd never seen kelp in this area before. It was very cool. And so this is how many urchins were removed out of Macklin last year. It was just over 100,000 urchins. The lighter color is by volunteers, and the darker color is by commercial divers. Commercial divers are operating under the same permit. They are still culling in place. They cannot remove them at this point in time for a profit. So they are operating under the LOA. They had 10 times as many days there as we did. So, in defense of volunteer divers, they had at least 10 times as many days there as we did. So, even more exciting, we had kelp, and you can see we had kelp at the end of 2025, juvenile kelp in Macklin. Um, that spike right there is pretty cool to see. So hopefully 2026. I'm excited to get back out there to do spring surveys to see if anything carried over. So Nellie's Cove in Port Orford. It is a focus survey site. Again, it was one of the first sites that was surveyed with the thought that Orca was going to become its own NGO. Surveys have been completed there every year since 2020, at least once a year. For the last 4 years, we've been doing spring and fall surveys there just to see what the difference is between spring and fall and if there's kelp. And if anybody's been to Port Orford before, this is us going down on the boat. We get lifted in and out of the water by a crane. Kind of fun. Again, diving in Oregon. Oops, sorry. Nellie's therefore has become a focused restoration site also. It is, again, in Port Orford, that is the headquarters of Orca. And so the most resources are available. The captain of the boat is more than willing to take us out at all kinds of last minute times. So it will be one of our focused restoration areas again for 2026. So right here, you can see we have a little bump in juvenile kelp, also in Nellie's in the fall. There were archive units. There were 7 archive units that were put into Nellie's Cove on the west side. And there were, the west side is the cold side, the right side is the control side, and it's separated by a rock barrier. There were baby kelps growing on the bottom. It was pretty exciting. They were small. They were probably 25 centimeters tall, but it was exciting to see baby kelps just growing on the bottom on the rocks. And you can see how many urchins we've taken out of Nellie's Cove over the years. Volunteers definitely have the commercial divers on this one. We took out a lot of urchins last year. A lot of days of diving and culling urchins. Chief Kiawanda Rock is another one that we're focused on. Again, this one is just west of Salem. It is dory diving. Surveys have been completed for 4 years now, restoration work for 3 years. So was no documented kelp regrowth last year. However, last year was the first year that we were really serious about the restoration work. In 2022, there was one day of restoration work, and that was it. Last year, 25, we had 4 days. So hopefully we get out there in 3 weeks, I believe it is, to survey and see if there's any results from last year. Okay, so oops. I was worried about this one. Yeah, it's not going to play. Okay, we're going to skip that one. Um,
Maybe we
but
can share the link to the video later.
yes, I can share the link to the video absolutely afterwards. So, here is how many urchins we took out total last year. I want to say it was 47,000 urchins came out of Chief Kiawanda Rock. As you can see in 22, it was less than 5,000. So really last year was the first year that any kind of uh, thorough work was done. So what are we going to use this restoration effort for? Um, Hopefully we can add more sites, restoration sites. Answer some community questions and study the economic impact of restoration efforts. In the last 4 years, the urchin fishery in Oregon, which was pretty big, has actually diminished, and the urchin fishermen are now have a much shorter season. They're harvesting a lot less good urchins to sell, and a lot of them have pivoted now to other fisheries because the money is not there. They're not making the money that they need to make to stay successful fishermen. So maybe with our restoration efforts, they can go back to urchin fisheries. So potentially we're going to go to Cape Lookout and do restoration work. Cape Foul Weather, one thing that's interesting about foul weather, yes, it's in the Central Coast. There is a rocky outcropping there. But Cape Foul Weather still has a little bit of a kelp forest. And so this is going to be more of preservation work rather than restoration work. So hoping to preserve the kelp forest that is there because it's easier to preserve what we have than it is to try and reverse from the urchin barren back to the kelp forest. And then also potentially South Cove of Cape Arago or Drake Point, which is a common urchin harvesting area. There's one fisherman that harvests there, and collects the urchins and feeds them and then sells them. But potentially can we go in there with our volunteers and make it more successful for everybody. So Cape Lookout is a little challenging. It is the most northern site. It is an hour boat ride from any port. So it is a potentially it takes a long time to get there. The boats are not cheap. It is beautiful diving. It is up against this rock wall. But excuse me, but potentially, depending on spring surveys, this could become a commercial restoration project. There already are two commercial dive operations that have said that they would go up there and harvest. Cape Foul Weather, like I said, is preservation rather than restoration. It is right out of Depot Bay. Again, Central Coast. Hoping to preserve what's there. One thing that's interesting about foul weather is that there's a marine protection area close by. So we would be working close to the NPA and potentially able to get some data from them for the control site, potentially, if they want to play. And then Drake Point and Simpson Reef, Cape Arago. So we have long-term monitoring sites there. And again, this is where one of the commercial divers goes to harvest urchins. And we would like to go and see what we can do to, after the spring surveys, if it could become a restoration site also. So our proposed restoration days that we have discussed with Orca um, are we're looking at quite a few days of volunteer culling, commercial culling, um, training divers, getting out on the water, and having some fun. So if you want to join us, please do. So in summary, um, monitoring is essential. We need to keep monitoring so that we can document existing resources and the changes over the time. Hopefully we can expand to additional restoration sites pending spring surveys and what the data from the spring surveys tells us. Hopefully we can fulfill community questions of what's going on and what is the status of our kelp forest at the moment. Study the economic impacts of restoration efforts. I'm sure the fishermen are going to want to share with us as soon as anything starts changing. Hopefully things start changing and getting better for them too. And so that's kind of it in summary. Reef Check and the Oregon Kelp Alliance work is funded by the NOAA Restoration Center. Orca is our only funding source. So if there are any funders out there that would like to help us out in Oregon, there's a QR code for donations. And there's a QR code for Orca if you would like to find out more information about Orca. If you're a scuba diver, you can certainly take one of the training classes in Oregon. We have the full monitoring class, the restoration class. Like I said, we will gladly take donations. And if you don't want to directly get involved with Reef Check in Oregon, you can also get involved with Orca too. They are always taking volunteers. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so we can answer questions.